Okay, so that was just a brief intro with some Rezo music, and appreciate your comments about me sitting more away from the camera. I'm curious to know why I was getting up so close. It was almost like it was my female nature that was being so intrusive and so like nosy and incestuous. Okay, this is not going to be a silly video, but I like to at least start and end with humor. So we are going to talk about something really awesome today and really important, and that is the question of where does love fit into philosophy? So this has been a question pondered by many in their investigation into the Western mind, and we see that some philosophers talk about love, but it's like a subtopic. It's not really an essential ingredient that's fit into their metaphysical model. You know, you see all of these wonderful models of consciousness and etc., but where is love? And otherwise they will speak of love in kind of a romantic, poetic way, which is not taken that seriously. So the reaction to this is people thinking that, well, there's no love in philosophy, so I'm going to go towards anti-intellectualism and the pseudo-spiritual New Age camps, and that's where they think they're finding love is just in feelings only. But this is division, dualism. We're dividing the mind and the heart, and as holistic beings, we know that this is that love and truth have to unify in some way, and at the ultimate level they are the same. But we want to understand in this the mind relative universe, like how to articulate the precise relationship between love and truth. So fortunately we can, because we live in an era of revelation in the Kali Yuga, and so the hidden occulted knowledge is now coming into light, and in a large part that is due to the work of Mark Passio and the Natural Law Seminar, which I highly recommend taking out. And he has provided us with the keys to understand this relationship between love and philosophy. And when I say philosophy, I don't mean the profession of philosophy. I mean, truth and knowledge, what every human should know about, what the education was supposed to be about, but instead we got indoctrination. So first we must discuss the three kind of essential parts of metaphysics. And the first part is the static and the permanent, realm of permanence. The second part is the dynamic movement, because we are in time. And the third part is duality. And so when we start with the static permanent, what are the static permanent universals here? And Plato went into that, and we're going to show the natural law expressance chart. And so Plato went into that, and he calls them the universal eternal forms. And so we have like love, knowledge, sovereignty, freedom, goodness, and order. But of course, the love is kind of left out when you read Plato a little bit. And so all of these, and these can also be like the transcendental virtues, and they all correspond and are equivalent at the highest level, the timeless level. So we have like knowledge being love, and goodness being freedom, sovereignty, all the same. So the second part of metaphysics is the movement, motion. We're moving through time, and that's why we have this arrow here. So there's a beginning and an end. There's a generative, there's an initiation, and then there's a manifestation, like the results. And then the third part, of course, is duality or polarity. And so we have the opposites between these things, in the relative universe. And in the absolute universe, we can say it's all just the positive, right? And so that's called the two-truth doctrine, which you can look up in the Kybalion. Now, what we see here is that love is actually the generative principle. It's the starting point to gain knowledge and to lead to order and goodness. And Mark Passio defines it as the expansion of consciousness. And in a sense, that is non-dual. Like we were saying, in the absolute, it's really all of this. So love has no opposite. Love has no division. So love is that wholeness. And you have to start, acquiring knowledge and moving forward in that state of wholeness, of embracing all that is. And also it has this evolutionary potential, the telos that was discussed in classical era, about that we're always moving towards an end, and the end is the good, and Plato considered the good to be the highest virtue. So simply, if we begin with love, we end with goodness. So then we can see why academia and philosophy have left out the starting point, essentially, the most important part, and that is because they want us to be enslaved. And by ignorance, because ignorance is what leads to evil and chaos and allows them to control us because we are confused. And if you look through the history of philosophy, you see like the philosophers totally spinning out and they're being in balance, because part of coming from love is having that gender balance between the masculine and feminine. And so these philosophers are going, spinning out left and right. They were never really able to establish metaphysics, and they kept destroying it every time they tried to establish it. And it's just a lot of chaos in philosophy, and that's because they weren't coming from love, and they actually thought that you start philosophy through the mind and through knowledge. But if you're not coming from love, then you're coming from a faulty foundation, and you're coming from the opposite, from fear. And this is the contraction of consciousness. And the contraction of consciousness is when, there's insecurity, there's divide, there's repression, there's unconsciousness, not willing to look at things. So love embraces and is able to look at the dark side and to look at the negative, and in so doing that can transform it through taking positive action. So without coming from love, you're fragmented. It's not whole. And so you're having these identifications, such as to the false self, which is the ego, or to the animalistic, the selfish agendas, having an agenda to gain something, either egoically, materially. So we can regard these types of narrow identifications. You may gain some truth, some partial knowledge, but you're not going to have the balanced holistic overview that's going to lead into freedom and into goodness. And when we talk of this false structure of identification, we can use a parable to illustrate this that Krishnamurti used when he was dissolving the Order of the Star. Now, the Order of the Star was supposed to be like the New World religion, of the New World Order. And Krishnamurti was supposed to be the second Messiah, but he was smart. He figured things out and realized that the whole system is a fraud, and that authority is the worst evil and is an illusion. And as a freedom seeker, he wanted to destroy all of these structures of religion, and that people have to adhere to a religion or organization in order to get truth. He said there is no middleman. Cut that out. You have a direct perception of truth yourself. Everyone has to find truth themselves. So the parable that he spoke of in the beginning of his speech goes like this. You may remember the story of how the devil and a friend of his were walking down the street when they saw ahead of them a man stoop down and pick up something from the ground, look at it, and put it in his pocket. The friend said to the devil, "What did that man pick up?" The devil said, "He picked up a piece of truth." The man said, "That's very bad business for you then." The devil says, "Oh, not at all. I am going to help him arrange it." Or you can say organize it. And so here we have, if you start from the mind, there's already going to be a prejudiced organization that in the spiritual sense is demonic, and the contraction of consciousness. And so Krishnamurti goes on to say, "I maintain that truth is a pathless land, and you cannot approach it by any path whatsoever, by any religion, by any sect. That is my point of view, and I adhere to that absolutely and unconditionally. Love, being limitless, unconditioned, unapproachable by any path whatsoever, cannot be organized, nor should any organization be formed to lead or to coerce people along any particular path." So, what Krishnamurti is saying is when he calls truth being limitless and unconditioned, that's unconditional love. That's why you have to start with this. You can't start with a particular model or structure, because that is going to be the devil's arrangement, the devil's organization. And at this point, it's really important to make an important differentiation between good structure and bad structure, because Krishnamurti does not make this clear differentiation, which shows to me that perhaps he did not fully understand it, although there's just taking him in good context or in bad context. You could see it that way too. But that differentiation between good structure and bad structure. So bad structure is when you have like the identification filters between you and perceiving reality. When you're coming from love, you just see all that is, because you're not afraid of anything. You're not shutting anything off. And this was something also discussed with Western philosophy in the phenomenologists like Bergson, as far as having that direct perception of reality that isn't using these structures to analyze. So yes, there's truth to that in the phenomenological, epistemological sense, but in the ontological sense, there is correct structure such as correct good philosophy, good metaphysics, the trivium methodology, that can be used to gain truth, because through the law of implication and inference, there is truth that we gain rationally and not just through observation, even though based on observation. So the axioms like law of identity, law of non-contradiction, and the methodology of grammar, logic, rhetoric are important. But of course, you have to come from love. If you are using the trivium methodology and you're not coming from love, then it will definitely lead to chaos. You will gain partial truths, but you're not going to have holistic truth. And so I wanted to mention Immanuel Kant because he had such a big influence in the history of the Western mind. And, he looked at the structure of consciousness as kind of preventing us from our perception of reality. So he made reality unknowable. And the reason is because he was coming from a skeptical perspective. He was coming from fear, like all I can know is the structures in my mind. I don't know if they correspond to reality. I don't know if objective reality exists. And that was a contraction. And with love, we say we have the ability to gain knowledge, and we move forward. There's the evolutionary principle of love and of gaining knowledge. And it's not about setting limitations and restrictions. So Kant was interesting because he wanted to see the limitations of knowledge, and he ended up creating the limitations for knowledge. So we really want, if we're coming from love, we want to keep knowledge open-ended, and we always want to have faith that we can discover it. So in closing, I want to say that I have applied this model for the last 3 years, and it is correct. You want to demonstrate these metaphysical models in reality, and anytime I've made a decision from a contraction or from fear, it's led to this. And so this is just very useful at a practical level. So in wrapping this up, we see that love is the foundation for philosophy. It's the main stuff. Oh my gosh. Okay, I know I'm a little crazy, but women philosophers, man. What's up with them? Just playing around. All right, I love you guys. Love you. Okay.